Good evening. My name is Danielle, and I'm sharing my single story video. As I watched the TED Talk video and getting ready for this, it made me think of my own life. I was born in my mother's heart and not in her stomach, as some people refer to being adopted. My sister and I both were. We are two biologically we're not related, but we are have been brought up and lived with the same family. We were raised in Orange County, in South Orange County at the beach. Little pieces of my life I still remember. I've always known I was adopted. It was celebrated. We have a unique ritual every time I have my birthday where my mom comes in to celebrate it. So it wasn't that it was ever frowned upon or I didn't know, because I've always known. I Growing up, I had long dark hair. My mom had bright blonde hair. I always knew I didn't look like her. It never bothered me. I never thought about it. I do know growing up where I came from, there were little things that my friends would say and my sister and I would talk about along the way as I've gotten older and thought about it. I realized there were pieces of my upbringing and my identity and the people that I related to that reminded me of this single story that was shared with that TED Talk. I remember I had friends, they all had bright blonde hair, especially I grew up right at the beach. And my sister and I, with our long dark hair, because we were both Mexican, we'd always want to put sun in, we'd want to look like them. Um, I remember my friends would talk about, what other things that we could do to get our hair to look more like them. And they didn't do it to be offensive. They just did it because everybody wanted to look the same and they were trying to help us look like them. I never thought about till I was older that they could look like us too, because growing up where I lived, people wanted to be blonde hair and have blue eyes and have um, very fair skin. I remember that my friends would tell me, don't tell people you're Mexican. Tell people you're Hawaiian. Tell people you're from, like you're Eskimo. It's trying to think of really exotic things. And I thought it was cool at the time. I think because of the exotic nature of being Hawaiian or something like that, or somebody from the islands. What I realized afterwards, especially as I've gotten older, is that it was more so because Mexican people were not looked at as the same level, especially where I grew up. I didn't have any Mexican friends, which seems really silly right now, especially in South Orange County. But my the people that I knew that were Mexican were kind of like those kids that I wasn't friends with, or people who were gardeners in my community, people that my cleaning lady, and I didn't think negatively of them. I just didn't necessarily think that they were the same as me. Um, so when my friends would say that, it just seemed I didn't take it as being disrespectful or mean. It seemed fun at the time to be able to think of myself as something different, but I didn't look at it like it was negative like I look at it now. Something else that it made me think about and doing this, and watching the video and listening to her share her stories, I remember when I applied to college and you have the long list of different majors that you can have. And when I saw that there were schools that you could have a bachelor's degree in Mexican American Studies, or you could take your gen ed courses. I took my speech class in Mexican American Studies about speech or something like that. And I honestly remember thinking, what is there, how could there be a study like that? How could there be a study of a culture of Mexican American people? Like, what is there to study? Like, what could that possibly be? And I remember signing up for it, and I remember honestly my mom saying to me, I wonder what that's about. Are you going to be comfortable in it? And I never thought twice about it, and I know she didn't mean it to be offensive, because it was just a different story than she's used to. But as I think about it now, especially listening to her, Jamanda, do the talk, I was brought up from a very single story lens, and my mom was too. She did the best that she could in trying to raise me to be proud of who I am in terms of my culture. And I think by her always telling me that I'm Mexican and never trying to make me feel different, that was the way that she knew. I remember asking her about it as I've gotten older, probably, become more aware as I lived outside of Orange County, which I look at as a very small bubble. Um, I've talked to her about kind of the cultural identity piece, and she said, we took you on vacations, I took you on cruises, and we went to Club Med. And I know that seems like a very fancy way, but in her way, in my parents' way, that's how they thought they would give us kind of some cultural identity, and I loved it and it was great, but I didn't think about it. I think now about it, and it's very different than pieces that I've experienced on my own than it was when I was little. But I know that they did the best that they can trying to help us do that. I remember always getting dolls that had blonde hair and Barbie having blonde hair, and I remember thinking, I want a doll that looks like me. I want a brown haired doll and a brown eyed doll. And I remember my mom searched high and low trying to find me a Cabbage Patch Kid that would do that. So I think in taking my upbringing from that very narrow lens, I know for my own children now, I really make it a priority that they have experiences where they don't feel like the only one. And they don't feel like they're singled out. And I try to do things to really celebrate their culture, especially because my children are biracial. So their father is African American and I'm Mexican. And I try to do as much as I can to celebrate all of that, to not identify one particular culture versus another for them, but I try to celebrate both. And it's always a unique experience when we're with my whole family. So you have my mom that has blonde hair, and then they're with us, and we still get the looks and people trying to figure out how everybody's connected. But I think that people do things and say things when they're not trying to be offensive. There's one thing if they're making a point and there's prejudice and racism going on and it's overt. But I know for me, my single story, and these are pieces that I've shared that I've always have felt growing up, and I recognize it especially later. But there is a danger because it's those assumptions and those the thinking that those kids used with me when I was a kid and didn't know any better about tell people that you're something else came from somewhere because we don't grow up thinking that. So I try to be very aware for my own children that they don't have to ever pretend that they're something not, or not totally be aware of the culture that they have. So that is my single story. And I think it relates to what our assignment is about. But I know that those are pieces that I've always remembered as I've gotten older and that I have taken to heart as I'm bringing up my own children. Thank you.